Automotive, I fix everything.
Today's project is part one of the two-part series, the John Deere 1026R Compact Tractor Tune-Up. Before I begin, I tracked down the part numbers for the supplies and parts for the tune-up. I tried several online resources and found misinformation. This page was provided to me by the local John Deere dealer. Removal of the mower deck is essential to perform many aspects of the tune-up. For example, the engine oil drain plug is located above the mower deck. The removal of a mower deck on a properly maintained machine is quite easy. The first step is to lower the mower deck all the way to the ground. Lock out the spring-loaded wheel pins so the mower deck rests firmly on the surface. Rotate the cutting height adjustment knob to the install position. To release the rear locking cams, rotate the small lever protruding from the left-hand side. The locking cam was binding on the right-hand side. To release it, I levered it free with a wooden handle. When the locking cams are released, place the mower in four-wheel drive and slowly back over the mower deck. This will disengage the front and back locking hooks. It's much easier to remove the mower deck in the grass. But with the mower deck removed, I lifted it with the forklift and brought it over to the driveway for an inspection. I used a long-reach air gun to blow the debris out from the pulleys and hubs. Raising the mower deck up to working height made easy work of cleaning the mower deck and scrubbing it with a parts washer brush. I gave it a final rinse before I began my inspection. To allow easier access to the blades, I needed to readjust the forks. So I offloaded the mower deck and raised the forks to a comfortable working height. This is easier on your back and gives more leverage to repositioning the forks. With the deck wheels at the maximum height, it glides right onto the forks. Now I have much more clearance to remove the blades. I used a set of vice grip clamps as a blade brake. A C-clamp would also be a great alternative. A fully charged cordless impact driver had enough torque to remove the blades. The blades have moderate wear and would be a good candidate for resharpening. I used a wire wheel on a bench grinder to clean up the original grinding marks so I could establish a baseline. I ground the blades freehand, slowly tipping the edge of the blade into the stone as I slid it back and forth along the ground edge. I slowly slid the blade back and forth, maintaining the angle as I watched the edge until the nicks disappeared. Here's a close-up of the edge with one nick remaining. With all 6 edges ground, the blades can be returned to service. I prefer a keen edge, so I took the blades to the next level. I honed the edge with a water stone and removed the final burr with a leather strop. It's now time to reinstall the blades. Here's a close-up of my improvised blade stop. A forklift and a cordless impact driver make blade installation a walk in the park. This photo shows the John Deere part number and the approximate cost of the mower belt. This photo was taken to show the proper routing of the mower belt and the tensioner spring. I placed blocks between the mower deck and the forks to allow the blades to rotate freely. This photo shows the mower gearbox must be removed to replace the belt. Finally, 2 photos showing the belt has severe checking. The first step is to remove the drive-over ramps and pulley covers. When I deep cleaned the blade hubs, I found stones lodged in the cavities. A close-up shot of the belt routing at the tensioner. I applied pressure to the tensioner with a large wrench to remove the belt. The belt cannot be removed without full removal of the gearbox. I usually work alone. This time I had an observer drop by. While assembling the parts and supplies I needed to do the tune-up, I noticed the John Deere specification called out Super Lube. I had Super Lube on hand for another job I had planned. I chose Super Lube for several reasons. First and foremost, it's synthetic. It's dielectric, it's heavy duty, it's food grade, and it meets all the criteria required for a John Deere tractor. If you've never loaded a grease gun before, here's a quick tutorial. The first step is to retract and lock out the plunger. Remove the cylinder from the body, and if it's a used gun, remove the old cardboard cylinder. Remove the plastic cap and insert the cardboard tube with the open end face down. Now lift the pull tab and peel away the seal. Reassemble the gun and release the plunger. Some of the better grease guns have an air bleed valve that you can open and relieve the air pressure. If your grease gun does not have a bleeder, you can loosen the cylinder slightly to allow the air pressure to bleed around the threads. As the air bleeds, the plunger will retract and you can retighten the cylinder. I chose a lock and lube grease gun connector. It latches firmly onto the Zerk fitting. This saves time and money. Your time is spent cleaning the old grease, not removing and wasting the new grease. It's important to remove any squeezed out grease to prevent dirt from collecting in the area. I lubricated the mower deck before reinstalling the belt. This allowed me to check the pulley bearings for wear. After the hubs were greased, I spun the pulleys to be sure that the blades spun freely without binding. Notice the belt is trapped by the tension spring and the two mount brackets on the angle gearbox. I removed one self-locking nut and two mount bolts from the angle gearbox. I loosened the other and pivoted the wire mount. The gearbox must be removed completely because the belt routing is trapped between the wire brackets at the front and back. I improvised a spring puller using some scrap electric wire that was laying nearby. Next I removed the spring and the belt came free. With the tensioner unloaded, I removed the black cap and oiled all the pivot points and the pulley axle. I ran the tensioner through its full range of motion, pivoting the joints and rotating the pulley. Loosely place the belt in position with the long segment running across the back behind the angle gear drive mount. Then tuck the belt under the forward tensioner bracket. Now form a loop under the angle gearbox mounting position. Tip the angle gearbox into the loop and seat the belt in the pulley. I pivoted the wire mount bracket into position and installed the two forward mount bolts. Next I installed the rear mount bolts and tightened all 6 mount bolts evenly. To make mower deck installation easier, I lubricated the splines of the angle gear drive. While at the rear of the mower deck, I grabbed the oil and lubricated the rear locking cam. Then I moved to the forward attachment assembly, lubricating all the pivot points and the springs. Next, I turned my attention to the anti-scalp wheels. It's important to run all the parts through their full range of motion to spread the lubricant through all the hidden areas. I started at the top with the pin and lubricated all the moving parts, including the spring. I finished by lubricating the wheel axle pin. With the mower deck complete, I rolled it free of the forks and began to lubricate the fork locking mechanism. The hydraulic arms can be thought of like human arms. They have a shoulder, an elbow, and a wrist. There are 2 grease fittings at each location. I removed the fork accessory and raised the hydraulic lifting arms to a comfortable working height. To prevent contamination, I cleaned the Zerk fittings prior to attaching the grease gun. As you pump the gun, watch for old grease squeeze out. When new grease emerges, you are done. It's important to clean the Zerk fittings and wipe away any squeeze out to prevent accumulation of dirt and debris. Don't overlook the quick release latch. Although it shares a grease fitting with the shoulder, It has two hooks and a barrel that must be oiled to allow easier operation. Lastly, I oiled the quick disconnect pins, including the lock ring pivot point. This made the lock ring open and close smoother and easier. Working from front to back, the next logical step was the lower chassis lube. The mower deck was off and the hydraulic lifting arms were raised, so I grabbed a mechanic's creeper and slid under the tractor and began at the front. I began with the hydraulic steering actuators and worked my way back, greasing all the zerk fittings and oiling all the pivoting mechanisms and springs. I took a photo of this missing nut on the engine bell housing and picked one up at the John Deere dealer. Look closely for the grease fittings. They may be tucked away inside an inspection hole. I used a grease fitting adapter to reach into this position. This is a close-up of the mower adapter spline. It gets hand lubricated. All the linkage and pivot points received oil. There are two drive shafts with universal joints at each end. When I completed oiling all the mower linkage, I moved on to the three-point hitch. I began with the spreader bar, oiling the heim joints and pins. I oiled the turnbuckle attachment points. Be sure to oil the lower attachment points. Then I went across the top and oiled the three heim joints and special attention to the pins. This completes Part 1 of the John Deere Compact Tractor Tune-Up. Part 2 will be comprised of the complete engine tune-up, from the fuel filters to the coolant flush. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something along the way. Remember, subscribers are always welcome.